Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's tutorial we are going to talk about ASP.NET Core session-based authentication, which is based upon the cookie and normally known as cookie session authentication. So we'll learn how we could use to write a cookie and create a session on the server and write a cookie for that, which is encrypted by default. And then we could actually utilize any of the methods, which is an authorized method or a secured method for that, say. Normally the methods are not secured by default, but unless and until you want to secure all those methods, there could be two types. One is purely session-based authentication, which we are going to discuss today, and the second is if you have a single page applications like React and ASP.NET Core as a web API, so you could use a JOT tokens also. That's another way of writing the code to secure the application, but we'll be concentrating more on ASP.NET Core session-based authentication, which is based upon your cookie way of writing the code. So let's not waste more time on that and let's get started off. So friends, in order to test the ASP.NET Core session-based cookie authentication method, let's firstly create an application which is just like a .NET MVC application. So I'll just use .NET new MVC -o, and then I specify the name of the application. So let's say RKV MVC, and let's say session cookie, something like this. So whatever you want to give the name, that's fine. So we'll create that. If you don't know how to create those templates or anything, there's another video where I have actually shown how to create it using the command line arguments. That's the .NET framework, and using that we could initialize any kind of a template and scaffolding. Now once it is done, so if I just want to use this one, so if you see MVC, and then yep, I'm into that particular folder, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna open that folder, and it is in temp, and this is my RKV session cookie. So I'll open that folder, and that folder gets opened up. So it's a typical MVC application where you would have controllers, models, properties, and whatnot. So it's fundamentally a normal kind of a MVC application. Now there are two things which we need to understand. So first is we need to create a method which is a kind of a post method, I would say, and that is going to accept a username, password, and is going to sign in for you. So we can test that through Postman. I'll show you how you can test it. And the second one is we'll create another route or a method which would be secured, and that secured method can only be called in if we are going to sign in. So if we are not signed in, this method is not going to be invoked, or it is going to return you back some kind of an issue or error, or it is going to sign back you to the page where you actually need to sign back and present your user credentials. So what we'll do, we'll go on to the home controller, and we'll okay, let's firstly create a model. And then within the model, I'm just gonna copy this so that I can just copy this whole stuff. And then within the model, I'll create a new file, which is, let's say, user .cs, and I'll paste it over here. So this is user.cs, which is fine. And I need two things. One is username, and the another one is password. So I'll create two attributes or two properties out there, which is fine, get and set. Let's say I'm just keeping it by default. You could probably just use it as a get also, because we don't need get or set, or whatever the way you want to use it. Okay, now this is set up. We'll go back, we'll close this one, we'll go on to the home controller, and within the home controller I'm gonna create a method, let's say over here, which is HTTP post. It's a post method, and I'll say public action result and login user. Now it is gonna take a user class, let's say user, right? So something like this. So that's the case. And now we could use write a method by which it can authenticate from a database or anything. But for demonstration purpose, I'm just saying if I pass on, let's say, username is equal to, if I pass on Rohit, and then I'll pass on user.password is equal to Dhand. So this is only for demonstration purpose. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to do let's say I create a claims. Now claims is just like adding some more information to the authenticated user. It's a OAuth standard which we could use. So we could create multiple items into that, and then I'm just gonna create some basic stuff over here. So let's say list of claim, and I'll just simply say new of claim, and then claim type dot name. I'll just specify just like a full name as Rohit Hunt. So that's one, and I'll close this one. So that gets closed, and I just need to make sure dot name. Oops, I don't need to specify is equal to, it is how you specify. So that's my claims part. And then I also need to specify variable claims identity new of claims identity, and then I'll just pass on the claims which I created. That's one. And then I'll pass on the another one, which is cookie authentication defaults dot authentication scheme. So that's another which I pass on. So these are two. And then finally I need to pass on another argument. No, so these two arguments, which is perfectly fine. So I'm using, so what it does is it's saying you please add on these claims to that is one. And then also we are going to use the cookies authentication default scheme, and we need to set this configure this up like as a kind of a dependency injection within the program.cs, which will come later. But firstly, let's set it up. And then finally we can also set up certain let's say authentication properties. Props is equal to new of authentication properties, which is fine. And I'll just use this as an empty one. I don't need anything, but in case you need to set it up, you could set this up. This actually helps you to finally set in within our sign-in function. Now how we are going to use this sign-in function? So we are going to use http context dot sign in, and I'll say async function, and we want to pass on cookies authentication defaults dot authentication scheme. So that's my first. The second is new of claims principal, so which is gonna be and I'm gonna pass on claims identity, which I just created as a variable out here. And then so these are the case. Let me just shorten it so that we could see. So cookie authentication defaults dot authentication scheme new of claims principal. So I'll just need to pass on this claim identity as one of the instantiation for claims principal, like what are the claims which the user is bringing. Guys, this video cannot really explain what the claims are. This is a separate topic. Like we need to have a separate video for claims and everything, because it's fundamentally the framework of the OAuth and authentication principles. So I'll try to create a video on that, but right now it's just like, okay, this is the user, these are the claims, the email, what role he's carrying out, what let's say privileges the user have. You could add many things into that. And then finally the auth, let's say the one which we created, which is auth properties. So now the authentication properties though we didn't create anything authentication props, but that's what we need to pass on over here. So that's all done, which looks fine. And then once it's all looks good, so what we could do is we could go back, and then finally we could say return okay, and I'll just simply say success is equal to true, means the cookie was written, everything was fine, all looks good. But what else? Let's say if it was not there, means the username password was not right. So what you want to do? So what I want to do is I just want to return okay again, and I'll say new, but I'll say error, and I'll say either please check your username or password. So that's what I want to check it around. Okay, so this is a simple case of creating first function, post method, login user, you pass on a user model, you check certain, it's a hard-coded one. That's not the way we'll do that. In the actual prod application, you might check it from a database like a NoSQL, SQL or whatnot, and then you add the claims, identity, authentication properties, and then you use the sign in async method to actually sign in and write all that stuff. So this would actually create a cookie on the client variable also, and a session on the server side. Else if the users and password is not right, so we are just returning an error, which is perfectly fine. Now the second thing which we want to use is so let's say I want to create a method which is let's say http, and it is get. So that's the get method, and that's my what you call as the authorized method. And the authorized method, I'm just gonna call it, so I can just say simply get let's say user details. Let's user details, and it is authorized. And what I'm gonna use is, so this is my method authorize, and we'll just use public, and we'll just say JSON result, which I'm gonna result it as a JSON result, and I'll just simply say get secured details, something like this. You could keep any name for that, that's fine. Now for the authorize, let's see what the authorize is. It is not exactly getting through, so we'll see where the authorization, I think so we are not importing that, so we'll just simply say microsoft.asp.netcore.authorization. So that's fine, which removes our error over here, which is perfectly fine. And then finally I just want to return over here something which is just like, say, variable result user is equal to new of user, and we'll just pass on, let's say, username, I'll say Rohit Hunt, or let's say Rohit, and password is, let's say, I'll just pass on Hunt, right? And then we just want to return JSON result user. That's all. That's what we want to do. So we just created two methods. One is the login user, which is actually used to pass a username password and then used to sign in. Before sign in, if we call this method, we will not be able to call this because it's a secured method. We have kept an authorize over there. But once you sign in, it would actually, you will be able to call this method because the cookie is stored, and then when it again calls back to the server, the cookie information is sent back to the server so that it can authenticate whether the user is credentials are okay and the user is logged in or not. So that's how this method is going to work. Now before we test it, there is something which we need to do it on the program.cs also. So over here we need to set up some information, and that information we set it up like this. So once we come here, so we'll just add up the services over here. So builder.services.add authentication, which is fine. And then I just want to add up the by default authentication, which is cookie authentication defaults.authentication scheme, which is fine. And then I'll just simply say .add cookie, and I'm just gonna specify some information about what happens when the cookie authentication is set up. Now this authentication information adds up certain things. So one is the cookie.name. You could provide any name. Let's say I'll just provide it RKV app cookie, right? So that's one. The second is cookie dot, let's say, expires expired time span is equal to time span from minutes, and let's say I just want to give it 10 minutes. Within 10 minutes it would go away. And then option start login paths. So it means if let's say the user is not logged in and user tries to access a page which is secured, so what I want is I want that they should go back to, let's say, home dot let's say login page, right? So that's the login route we want to set it up. And then if the users is access is denied path, then where you want to go, so you want to set up, let's say, /home error, right? So that's where you want to go. So this is set up. Expired time span. Okay, why it is giving us an issue? Expired time span. Oh, sorry. It's not options dot expire time span. So key name we have already given. Okay, and one last thing. So before the authorization, so we set it up app dot use authentication. That's all. That's what we need to do. So we set up the authentication to use cookie session, and we set up certain parameters. That's the default scheme. You could set up JOT, bearer tokens, or anything else, but we are setting it up as cookie authentication. And we set up certain parameters: cookie name, expiry time, login path, access denied path, where you want to send the user for that. Okay, that makes sense. And what we want to do is we want to now test it. So let's try running this one. So let's firstly compile that. So .NET, and I would just simply say build. Okay, because I've created this is a file which it has created the VS Code. I'm just gonna delete this, which is perfectly fine. Save this, and now I'll run this .NET build. So it builds up, and then it says in my home controller error expected. Okay, so build failed. So in my home controller, which is here, did I do some mistake? Let's see. So HTTP post, this looks fine. User, which is okay. List claims, this looks fine. This is fine, and that's fine. Else and authorize, which is good. New of user, and it fundamentally looks fine to me. We need to see where that issue could be, so I don't need the comma over here, and I don't need. Okay, so let's see. So we'll just build it one more time. Two errors are there. Line number 39. So 39 is this one, which is new authentication properties. Okay, I missed probably the bracket, so let's build this. two errors again. So one is column is expected and one is bracket is expected, line number 39. Okay, so new of claims and authentication. Okay, let's see where we are doing that mistake. So line number 39, which it says is something which should be fine. Why it is giving us an issue? Okay, so this is the method which is there. So authentication scheme, and then new of claims identity, and then the properties. Okay. Oh, this is the issue. So that's the issue, which is okay. And then we'll just go back, run this one more time, .NET build. It looks fine. Yeah, all errors are gone. Now I can just say watch run. Now once you do that, okay, it runs it for you. Okay, so now the first thing what we'll test is the method which is secured method, which is authorized get user details. So I already copied that and created a get call over here. So if I send it, when you send that, it gives you a 404 not found. Why? Because when you're trying to access that method, it is actually sending you back to the login method, right? The login method, because that particular login method would help you to remove that what you call as sign in first. So what we'll do is, let me just, okay, let's run that again over here. So we'll see. Before that, I'll just try to run it over here, get user details. So when you do that, it immediately starts you go to home/login. So that was the stuff which was set in your program.cs, means the configuration of a cookie authentication. So it means when I call the same thing, it says 404, it is not found. Why? Because that method does not exist, so which is fine. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna invoke the another method, which is my post method, and that's login user. So now for the login user, what I'll do, I'll actually go back and create another method. I'll just copy this, and then you create a new one, which is a post method, and then you say login user. Now once you do that, so you have it over here, which is, so you could specify your data. So I'm gonna specify my form data. So once is the username, which is Rohit, and let's say the another one is password. So let's say I'm gonna give a wrong password, because if you see I've hard-coded the password as Dhund, but I'm gonna give Dhund1. So when I send that, it actually gives me login user, because probably I have not specified home. So then I specify send, yes. So when I specify send out here, it actually gives me an error. Please check your username password, which I'm expecting, because if it is not Rohit and Dhund, I'm not able to sign. It is just gonna return me back, hey, either the username or password is wrong. But let's now call this with the right username and password. So I'll say Rohit and Dhund. I click on the send button, and it gives me success true. Once it gives me success true, because it has actually signed in, created a cookie, and then returned me success true. So if I go back and check on the cookies, so if you see the cookies over here, there is a RKV app cookie, and this is the value from localhost. So that is gone. It's written over here, which is perfectly fine. Now I'll go back to my get and get user details, where initially it was saying not found because I was not signed in. But now if I return, if I send this and call this method, it gives me the actual username and password, which is Rohit and Dhund. So if I go back and check it out, it actually gives me the new user, which is Rohit and Dhund, which I'm just creating from the model user, giving a username, password, properties, and then sending it back. So that's how, guys, you see you could actually work through your Postman, get it through, and then you do it. And in order to just like verify one more time, so you could go back to your cookies over here in your Postman, remove this cookie because it is stored out here. Now what you do is you just again call it back. Now here you see the status is 200, we were able to call, but if I send this, it again turned back to 404. Why? Because the cookie is not there. We have just removed the cookie, just like signed it out. So once the sign out is there, the cookie is removed, the user is not authenticated. So what we can do, again go back, send the post request, cookie is again created, go back to the get request, send that, and you get the result. So I hope guys this video definitely makes sense. It's a little lengthy video, but there are some moving parts here and there. I hope this one is gonna be useful for the .NET applications, or previously it was called as .NET Core, or it was even called as .NET Framework. When I'm using these words, they are interchangeably used. .NET now was referred sometime as .NET Core. .NET Core was before referred as .NET Framework. Fundamentally, it's still a framework, you call it. And if you don't know what a framework is a big library, right? It helps you to automate various tasks and other things, just like a Rails framework is there. So if you are developing an application where you are using the server-side scripting, you are not using a single page or a multi-page app, the session-based cookies could be one of the best ways to authenticate your users and check it out whether the user has been signed in or not. But if you're using a single-page applications like React or Angular, then probably we have another mechanisms like JOT tokens or bearer tokens which we could use. So I hope guys you will like this video. It is going to help you out in your projects. And if you have not already subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe it. I'll be coming back with more videos. Thank you.